Hello and welcome to the 2023 Train the Director webinar series, a collaboration between the FTCOE and ASCLD. Our presenters today are Mandy Tinke, Laboratory Director for the Allegheny County Office of the Medical Examiner, and Timothy Suggs, Quality Manager for the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory. Without further delay, here are Mandy and Timothy.
Thank you. Hello, I am Mandy Tinke, the Laboratory Director for the Allegheny County Office of the Medical Examiner and Forensic Laboratory Divisions. I think first, to begin explaining our track that we've taken to try to go completely digital, it's going to be important for you to understand what we're structured as. So Allegheny County is located in Western Pennsylvania. We are the Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania area, and you can see that our county is actually separated into multiple municipal agencies. So all of those municipalities have police departments that would potentially submit evidence to our office. We have a population of approximately 1.2 million residents here in Allegheny County, and we do accept submissions from local, state, federal divisions. We have public health submissions that come to our office. We also have emergency services, such as the fire marshal's office. In addition, we are also structured as a medical examiner's office, which means we have evidence in the morgue operations that has to be submitted to the laboratory. So to look at the divisions that we have here in the office, which will help explain why we structured our IMS systems the way that we did, we have morgue operations, containing everything pertaining to medical legal death investigations. And then we have our laboratory operations, which are quite a few divisions here at the office, including a crime scene unit that responds 24/7 around the county. Now, first, I'd like to begin by explaining a little bit of our history and our journey. So the first thing that I believe is the most important to explain is that it has been a village of many individuals. We've built our foundation from all of the work that was put in, and now we're building walls and building different levels to make our processes better. So we're building from the foundation that was laid by those who came before us. Multiple scientists, multiple individuals in the morgue operations, leaders, directors, quality managers, division leadership. So all of their work is how we've gotten to where we are now. So it's definitely been a team effort. Now, first, to explain a little bit of how we were able to start this process in the early 2000s, we really needed to define our goals. So what do you want to do when you're looking at entering into an IMS? For our office, we wanted to look at evidence management, casework documentation, casework management, and also have a format for a data warehouse. All of those things were very important to us. So then, as we are moving forward, we began evaluating all of those options that are available in the community based upon what our ultimate goals were to make sure that we were going to be able to meet and fulfill those. That led us to 2006. In 2006, ACOME actually implemented our information management systems, and we did it both in the morgue operations as well as in the laboratory operations. So those are two separate, very customized systems. However, they do have levels of integration with one another. So the systems are different because the needs were very different in the morgue operations and the laboratory operations. The integration is wonderful because we do need to work together since we are using the laboratory to assist with the investigations in the medical examiner's office. So 2023 now, where are we? We are still using those same two systems. Are those systems the same as they were upon implementation? Absolutely not. We've been able to grow. We've been able to change things based on how our needs have changed through all of those years, which has been a huge benefit to our actual process. So the first thing I want to start with, I cannot emphasize enough, the most important aspect of doing something like this is the team involvement. Having input from every facet of the operation is vital. Now, for myself as a director, I have been here for over 20 years now. So I've worked in several areas of this department. As a director, it would be inappropriate for me to make a decision on how a scientist should be entering their data without talking to them to ask, what will work best for you? I'm not doing the work. I'm not boots on the ground. Having the input from the team is vital for the success of the program. So let's go to where our starting line was. For us, we really needed to look at how our processes were laid out. And this is also very important for the success of making a transition to digital. Start with the process you have now. What are you physically doing? How do you take each step? What pieces of paper are you using? If that process is working, if you like that process, fantastic. Keep it. You're creating now that outline that explains how you make your pathway in the digital system. Mimic what you have. If you're using worksheets, create your data entry that have the exact same fields as your worksheets. That's going to help ease that transition. Change is difficult. That will help ease that because nothing's going to change about the process. How do you handle getting resistance about leaving those pieces of paper behind? I understand. I'm a list maker. I like to cross things off. It makes complete sense. You don't want that to stall your process. Important to be able to keep in mind, if you don't change the process, but only the mechanism, it might make that a little bit easier. The paper will eventually float away. You're changing from using an ink pen to using a keyboard, but what you're actually doing didn't change. It's also important to remember, and this was something we always had to keep in mind, what aspects are going to work for the entire group and what aspects are going to work better customized. If you have evidence receiving and evidence submission, those processes apply the same way for a drug chemistry unit as they do for a forensic biology unit. So you can have a generalized, consistent, and standardized approach so everyone knows how that operation works and everyone is involved with being able to explain that. Now, on the opposite end, what aspects are better to be customized? If you actually have a toxicology division and you're telling them that they need to enter their information into a system the same way the firearms examiners are, you already are entering change, and now you're trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and that's not going to work. It's going to cause more friction. So make sure you remember you have to keep in the forefront what works for each unit, and can we customize to make it easier for them. Now, in 2010, we actually moved into a pre-log portal system, which, using our same information management system, allowed for a lot of increase in efficiency. This was actually a joint interlaboratory cooperation. We are very fortunate in the state of Pennsylvania that all of the laboratories across the state from the various agencies have a very nice working relationship where we can have these discussions and we can enter into some type of a cooperation that's going to increase the consistency for all of the customers. So this new system streamlined our submission process, which means we can have officers in, submit the evidence, and they're able to leave faster, and that evidence gets into the vault. It also gave officers consistency. Depending on what laboratory system they needed to submit to, now they actually have the same process for where they're going. And of course, we always want to think about sustainability. Entering into a pre-log portal system allowed us to completely eliminate printing final reports from the laboratory and mailing those reports. So we have a cost savings as well. Now the user can enter the portal. When those reports are approved and complete, they can get them themselves. Always, though, you want to make sure you maintain some form of a manual process in the event that you need it as a backup. Maybe there's a new agency who's unable to submit through the portal. Our agency is very unique, especially with our environmental division. We have individual agencies there, like the health department, that can't go into the portal. So we do those processes a little bit different for submission, but we make sure we have that as a backup plan. Now, one of the additional things that I believe was very integral to the success of our system is the fact that we have an individual position that manages our information systems management. So that individual actually came from the bench in the lab. And it's nice to have that person as a liaison between the information technology side and the users of the system because they are able to speak both languages. We have an incredible Department of Information Technology here in Allegheny County, and they can do a lot of wonderful things. But without communication, every process is more difficult. So having that connection and somebody who could speak both languages makes that a lot smoother. The other thing is you're able to have different conversations by creating information management committees to share ideas. What is someone else doing? What are they doing so that now I can look at, maybe I can enter into something like that. Maybe that will work for me. One of the best things about this webinar is I was able to be introduced to Timothy. I learned so much and had such a wonderful conversation when he and I spoke. That wouldn't have happened otherwise. So having those communications definitely help. A few additional benefits to a digital platform that has allowed us to streamline: we will now have subpoenas rather than being sent hard copy. They're sent via email and then distributed to the users via email. Requests for analysis. Now that could be exceptions. It could be requests to expedite things. All of the requests and the approvals we can accept via an email. Now we have documentation of all of that communication, and we can attach it directly to the case record. Same thing for when we get requests for final documents and any support documentation. Could be discovery requests, outside entities asking for things, or since we're a medical examiner's office, also families. Now those can be received electronically and actually entered directly into the system. For the family requests, we've been trying to make sure we have at the forefront the customer. So with that, we've been able to update in areas like the website, where we have PDF availability, so an individual can still print that paper if they need to, but also we have online submissions. Those online submissions are built helping families and helping individuals who need that information at their fingertips to be able to access them in multiple ways. Maybe they only have a telephone. Maybe they only have a smartphone. They can still request the same thing someone with a desktop at their home can do. So our Department of Information Technology was able to help us build all of that to make sure our customers have access to what they need. In addition, though, when that submission of the online form comes in, DIT was able to integrate that with a system we utilize called OnBase. With that system, we now have a log of that request, and as soon as it is submitted, an email notification is sent to the responsible parties that we've put into the distribution group, which helps eliminate any of those cases where we may have something slip through the cracks. Now it's going right to who's supposed to get it. Those individuals can handle the request and move forward and document that. Now, moving more to the administrative information that we may be working on that we've been able to launch into a digital type platform. Now, these types of things could be available for anyone in the office. It's not necessarily specific to laboratories. But one of the large programs that we use here is Qualtrics. Now, Qualtrics allows us to do our document management, but we're also able to do additional tasks, such as security access requests. If we need to change somebody's security, we're able to submit those, have an entire chain showing formal approvals with dates and times. Security reviews. Maybe we have an issue that we need to take a look at. We can ask for those reviews to be documented. Time and attendance, any HR type related issues. Employee records. We now can have an employee record that is all inclusive, that when we open it, say for our own business or also for an assessment, it will show all of that employee's information, including transcripts, authorizations, training records. No more going to that shelf in that entire storeroom with 3-ring binders. Also in our system, we can do our high fives, which are compliments, either internal or external, complaints that will show the workflow of all of the action taken to resolve that, and also suggestions. So we're allowing a platform then for our team members to more easily bring in their ideas. Tell us what you would like. We're also moving now to all of our purchasing. So all of our purchasing will be done through the system, which will then allow for documentation of all of the approvals that need to happen, and then also allow for a repository of inventory. We can have our original orders, our packing slips, all of that will be in one location. A lot of Qualtrics for us is utilized for our quality assurance processes, documenting proficiencies, deviations, non-compliances, discrepancies, any of our instrument and equipment logs, casework authorizations, and also risk assessments. The beauty of having it set up in this system and all of the work individuals have put into doing this means that now we have everything inclusive. We've eliminated that paper. We've added actual diagrams at the bottom of our workflows that show where the workflow goes. So that's allowing the user to understand maybe more exactly what's going to happen. It's also providing clear and consistent communication. So for that reason, now we're seeing that individuals that need to be notified of final decisions are, and they're all getting the same message, which is a wonderful thing to have happen. So in addition, any of this process that we have in Qualtrics for the quality assurance or the quality management system is wonderful to have in an inclusive system for our assessments. We have our accreditations in place in this office for both the morgue operations and the laboratory operations. And this is making it more convenient for the assessor to have one location to go to for most items. But then also we're able to provide links that they do not have to be on site. If individuals have remote status, we're able to still provide them that access. Another functionality in the office that we've really started to use is Microsoft Teams. So for Teams, we have office-wide teams that have more general administrative and HR documents. Every section has an individual discipline team where they've made the decisions on what works best for them to be able to utilize this most efficiently for the division. We have the ability to do chats, so having easy and efficient connection with individuals. But then also, if we have cooperative discussions, different offices, and we need to have a face-to-face meeting, all of that can be done through Teams, and we can also share a channel, so if we have to work on something jointly. Finally, and this is one of my favorite parts, we do have most of our information management system for the data we're putting in. We have a group that our county administration has brought on board called County Stat, which allows them to access our data warehouse and use that data to create dashboards. It's all internal only. It's confidential information because it's from our case records, but it allows individuals like myself to have real-time data directly from my IMS, and I can do case management decisions. I know what was completed and what we're doing still. I can see key performance indicators. I can see individual sections, and that also is something that the individual sections have started to build dashboards of their own, so it makes their work more efficient. In addition, now I can do statistical analysis at the moment I need to, so I can make those data-driven decisions. So we're making smarter decisions based on real-time information. So what comes next for our office? We have made a lot of steps to try to move to more of a digital system. We do have some paper, but we have completely eliminated notebooks. That was in every division. We've eliminated in several divisions having any of the data be printed out as well. The worksheets are built into the system. We are still moving forward to complete that process further. Ideally, we would like to have no case file whatsoever, and everything can be in one location. So we're working on getting that software set up to do the bridge building for instrumental data to go straight into the system, eliminate having to walk around jump drives. Additionally, we're looking at different programs that we can utilize to bridge as well, such as Adobe. If we have packets that we have to put together, we can use Adobe Pro to do that. We're also looking at scanning in things upon submission. So that way, if the law enforcement agency provides us a report on hard copy, currently we may put that directly into the case folder. What we can now do with our scanning, scan it into the case record in our IMS, hand the report right back to them. Sustainability. And now we're not taking that file and having a location where we have to go to multiple places to get the information that we need. So we're always going to continue to evolve, and that's very important in this process. Internally, you are going to make changes. When a change comes up because you have an issue or because you're just looking at the process you're doing, always ask, can we improve on our electronic systems to help with this? Is there a Qualtrics workflow that would solve this problem or make it a little easier? Also, internal information sharing. Have the firearms examiners take a look at how the forensic biologists are using their portions of the system. Eliminate that tunnel vision. There are so many great ideas that are utilized in each division. The communication of what those are may really actually lead to changes in several and make things more effective and more efficient and easier for the team. Also, expanding your network. I explained at the beginning that I am so grateful I was able to meet Timothy, and that's exactly what I'm talking about. see how other people are doing things. No reason to reinvent the wheel. Bouncing ideas off of each other is how we get to success. Again, you saw this side. This is something I cannot say more of. Involve the team. Find out from boots on the ground what is going to work for you. Once we know what is going to work for members of the team, now you can start to make effective decisions, change your systems, allow for the transitions to be smoother, and end up with something at the end that everybody is able to work with. Here's my contact information. I am always open to any calls or any emails if there are any questions, or if I can help out or at least talk about what we do here in any way to assist another office. And now I'll turn it over to Timothy. Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Timothy Suggs, and I'm the quality manager for the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory. Transitioning from a paper file storage system to a digital file storage system can seem to be an overwhelming task. There is no one-size-fits-all solution, as each laboratory has unique requirements. This afternoon, I will discuss the North Carolina State Crime Laboratory's journey to a completely digital system. When looking at moving away from paper records to digital records, there are typically two types of information management systems involved. First is a laboratory information management system. This system is primarily used to store examination records such as examination reports, chain of custody for test items, bench notes that are taken during the examination, printouts from instruments, illustrative photographs, and quality control data. The second type of information management system I will refer to as the administrative information management system. This system contains all other documents and records. Examples include policies and procedures, purchasing records, validations, quality control data, and quality records such as corrective actions, management reviews, internal audit reports, and actions taken to evaluate risk and opportunities. First, I will review our implementation of a new LIMS. When we began the journey, the lab was using an in-house developed LIMS that had been in use for about 8 years. The platform was outdated, and there were no longer in-house resources to create a new or updated system. So the decision was made to find a replacement LIMS. In February of 2006, the process began to select a new LIMS. The lab wanted a commercial off-the-shelf system and developed a list of criteria that a LIMS must provide. Some of the criteria included the ability to store each case, all related data, and case reports in an electronic file. The system must allow submitting agencies to create new cases using online data entry. Once a case is submitted, the system must allow for the description of test items and the tracking of test items throughout all laboratory transfers. In addition, the system must allow for the addition of items derived from the submitted items during testing. The selected system needed to integrate with analytical instruments where possible, as well as other state-maintained databases. The selected system must be able to provide access to the district attorneys and case officers. After the needs of the lab were developed, the solicitation of LIMS vendors was done. The proposal from each vendor was evaluated based on the selection criteria, and then the new LIMS vendor was chosen. After the selection process was complete, then the transition process began. The lab had to ensure there were enough computers available for employees. Computers were needed in laboratory work areas as well as office areas. In most instances, one computer per person was not enough. From a safety standpoint, a lab computer needed to stay in the lab space, and then there needed to be office space computers as well. In addition, peripheral equipment was needed. Scanners were needed to convert the printouts to PDF to add to the case file. The lab was also implementing the use of barcoding of evidence, so barcode printers and scanners were needed. The selection and procurement process of these new items were completed, and in January of 2008, the new system was implemented. The initial implementation was limited. Customers still submitted the paper request for examination forms. Lab staff scanned and imported the forms into the LIMS database when the case was created. Case notes were made on electronic forms directly in LIMS. Reports were generated and stored in LIMS. The instrumental data was scanned and imported into the case file. In September of 2008, the first version of the customer web portal was launched. This version was mainly used to deliver lab reports to district attorneys' offices. The lab also began to pilot the electronic examination requests with a limited number of high-volume customers. Scanning of instrument data created several inefficiencies. With large volume printouts, the time to scan the pages was very time-consuming. In addition, there were times when the automatic document feeder of the scanner would double feed pages. When this occurred, the entire file would have to be rescanned, since scientists only had PDF readers and not PDF editors. To alleviate this inefficiency, the lab explored the ability to print a PDF file instead of paper. This process was implemented around March of 2009. The electronic files were created and USB drives were used to transfer these files from the instrument computers to the LIMS database. This process was much more efficient, however, the lab wanted to automate the file transfer. In discussion with the agency's IT department, it was determined that many of the instruments did not have the most up-to-date operating systems and security patches. As a result, these computers could not be added to the existing network. To overcome this obstacle, a standalone network was created for the instruments. A process was implemented that would automatically watch this network and import files into the associated case in LIMS. By October 2009, most instruments were connected to this network. The next area of implementation was getting all agencies submitting these requests for examinations electronically. This process took several years to implement and required the lab to provide training on how to use the system to the customers. As agencies were trained, they began to use the web portal for submissions. Web portal usage went from 5 agencies in 2012 to around 200 agencies in 2015. In 2017, all agencies, over 600, were required to use the web portal to submit examination requests. A few other notable updates happened with LIMS throughout the process. In 2013, the lab began providing updated discovery packets to all customers. These packets included the lab report, chain of custody, requests for examination forms, bench notes, and all instrument printouts. The subpoena functionality of the web portal was another major advancement. This was launched in 2015. The functionality allowed for the district attorney's offices to send subpoenas directly to the lab through the portal. The lab still had to review the subpoena and add to each scientist's court calendar. In 2020, this module was upgraded and allowed for the district attorney's offices to directly subpoena the reporting scientist. In 2021, the module was further upgraded and allowed the offices the ability to see the court schedule for all scientists and subpoena reporting scientists, reviewers, as well as chain of custody witnesses. The next leap in technology use implemented was the incorporation of RFID tagging evidence. The procurement process began in spring of 2015. Once the RFID vendor was selected, work began to integrate the RFID software with LIMS. In fall of 2020, the two systems were working in conjunction with each other and equipment had been received. By June of 2021, the equipment had been distributed and the first evidence inventory was completed using the new technology. In addition to using for inventory purposes, RFID readers are in use at the exit points of the evidence control sections of all 3 labs. These RFID readers ensure that all RFID labels that pass by are in a return to agency status. If not, there is a visual alarm that alerts employees to take follow-up action before the officer leaves. In 2019, the lab began scanning legacy case files and importing the files into LIMS. This project focused on trace evidence, forensic biology, latent evidence, and firearms cases and continued until funds were exhausted in 2021. In the end, around 500 boxes of legacy case files going back as far as 1987 were scanned, which equated to over 15,000 cases. And these cases were then entered into the current LIMS database. In 2013, the lab began using the data for cases pending examination in the LIMS database and comparing that information to the information maintained in the Administrative Office of Courts database to determine cases that had been adjudicated and no longer required examinations. Once lists were generated, they were sent to the district attorney's offices for confirmation. Once confirmed, the cases were terminated and the evidence was returned to the submitting agency. This process has saved valuable resources by no longer processing cases that have been adjudicated. Throughout the years, the lab has worked with North Carolina's Government Data Analytics Center to refine the searching and matching algorithms to better identify potential cases and to automate the process. This is still being refined to this day. While a massive amount of data is stored in a LIMS database, there are other records that are maintained by the lab. Next, I will discuss how we transition from storing records in filing cabinets to an electronic system stored in the cloud. I became quality manager in 2014. At that time, almost all records were paper files and stored in file cabinets. An electronic list of quality records was maintained. This list helped track the records as well as provide data for trend analysis. The lab was maintaining all policies and procedures electronically on an internal network that all employees could view. In addition, the policies and procedures were uploaded to the lab's external website for public viewing. Each section also had its own shared drive location and determined what information was saved to the drive and where it was stored. During internal audits, it was difficult to locate records to show compliance with accreditation standards. Starting in 2015, the lab began to transition as many records as possible to electronic format. The first step was to begin using electronic signatures on quality records. All of the forms used for these records were PDF documents. Electronic signature fields were added to the documents for approval. These records remained in a digital format. In addition, previously completed quality records were scanned as a PDF. All records were stored on the internal network. A folder structure and naming convention was implemented for all laboratory sections. This allowed for records to be located more rapidly during the internal audits. For years, the lab wanted to transition away from the shared drive to another data management system. Working with the department's IT section, it was determined that Microsoft SharePoint would be a good solution. IT created 2 data farms on the internal servers for records to be stored. One farm would be used to store the policies and procedures. The plan was for this information to be available through SharePoint to the public. The lab had learned that it was difficult to maintain the external website with the most up-to-date procedures. In addition, many customers wanted older copies of the procedures to review as well. It was determined that SharePoint could be used to house all of the information. Once compiled, the lab discovered that the server configuration did not allow for public access. The other SharePoint farm was for internal records only. This farm was still mostly used as a record storage system. The lab was able to integrate the existing shared drive network into the SharePoint network. All users would go to SharePoint and seamlessly navigate to the records needed, regardless of where they were actually stored. As mentioned on the previous slide, the lab was not able to provide public access to the information saved on the agency servers. So in 2017, the lab transitioned to cloud-based SharePoint through Microsoft 365. This platform allowed for public access to the policies and procedures. All files for public access were migrated from the agency server to the cloud. Since many of the internal files were still located on the agency's network and not uploaded into SharePoint, the process to move these files has taken much longer and is still in process. Additional files have been added to the public site in SharePoint as routine requests have been received. The next items added were assessment reports and QAS audit reports. Most recently, quality records that are not associated with a specific laboratory case file have been added. As the lab transitioned to remote work during the COVID-19 shutdown, the lab explored and implemented many items in SharePoint and finally began to use the functionality it provides. Since much of the work that had to be completed had to be done on site and contact between employees had to be minimized, the lab had to find a way to continue to work. SharePoint calendars were added for each section to manage when workers would be on site versus working remotely. This allowed managers the ability to balance requirements to minimize potential COVID-19 exposure and spread with completion of casework. In addition, the lab determined that many of the PDF forms used for quality records were not working well in the cloud-based version of SharePoint with remote work. As a result, electronic approval processes were implemented for procedures, quality records, purchase requests, and vendor evaluations. New forms built in Microsoft Word were developed and attached to the SharePoint approval flow. Based on how well these new approval processes were working, applying the concept to other areas is in progress. An example is implementing the same process for procedural deviations this year. Transitioning to a digital platform is never ending. As we look forward, we currently have 2 items on the agenda to complete. The first is finishing the migration of data stored on the internal servers to the cloud. Then we will have the fully functionality of SharePoint. The next is implementing a dashboard for case statistics. For years, this has been a manual process. Since 2019, the lab has been working with the department's IT section to build a dashboard. A draft version is operational. The lab is currently working to fine-tune some of the data contained in it. Lastly, technology changes daily. As needs of various groups within the lab change, we will explore the digital options available to support the operations. Quality control data is unique. Sometimes the information is better stored in LIMS, other times it may be better to store on internal networks or other databases. We have a combination of ways of storing quality control data. Each discipline has developed and implemented what works best for their data, whether it is importing directly into LIMS, scanning paper records and importing into LIMS, or creating a data collection tool in SharePoint to gather the information. There are numerous benefits of having all information in a digital platform. The first is that the information is readily available. No longer does one have to request a paper file to be pulled for review. The information can be located with just a few keystrokes. In a multi-lab system, the ability to cross-review case files is simplified. Cross-reviewing ensures a lab system does not end up with procedural drift at one location. Once items are digitized, information is easy to find by searching using keywords. This is true in both a LIMS as well as with SharePoint. Lastly, when using cloud storage, the information is readily available on multiple devices. The Microsoft 365 platform with SharePoint and OneDrive allow for an employee to download Microsoft's apps on multiple devices and access the same information wherever they happen to be, as long as there is internet connection. Some key takeaways. Transitioning from paper files to a digital system does not have to happen all at once. It can be a gradual process as resources allow. Next, paperless does not mean paper-free. There are some things that are more efficient to use paper for than be converted to digital format. Create your plan where you want to be and work to get to that point. While planning, keep in mind that technology is constantly changing. The more lab personnel can update as needed without having to rely on IT support, whether that is agency IT or contract IT, the better the digital platform will be. When choosing a digital platform, ensure that the functionality that is required now is part of the product and not planned for future development. Lastly, dedicate resources for digital platforms. When designing our LIMS transition in 2006, a team with members from all sections of the lab was assembled to be involved in the selection, customization, and deployment. Afterwards, a permanent position was created to be the LIMS administrator. For the administrative transition, I oversaw that process as quality manager. With the assistance of one coworker, we have learned how to build sites, list, document libraries, and surveys in SharePoint, as well as creating some approval workflows. There's a ton of information online about how to use and design SharePoint sites and pages. You may be surprised at the talent already at your disposal in your lab when you begin the process. I hope this information has been helpful. Transitioning to digital platforms can seem to be a monumental task, but it is achievable. Remember, it can be a journey instead of a leap. If I can be of any help as you begin your process, please feel free to contact me. Thanks for your time.
Hello, everyone. I am John Grassel with the Forensic Technology Center of Excellence, and I wanted to first thank Mandy and Timothy for your excellent presentations. And both Mandy and Timothy, we have several questions from the audience. And if there are more questions, please put them into the chat and we will capture them for you. Mandy, starting out with you, one question: how are you handling signatures for chain of custody documentation?
Certainly, that's a great question. For our IMS system, both on the morgue side as well as the IMS in the laboratory side, that is all handled digitally by barcode. So every single user has their own barcode that is them. So then they have their own passcode as well for their account. So when there is a chain of custody transfer, they have to enter and authorize the transfer to their custody. So that way it's all logged. The system itself has everyone's signature in place in the system as well. Now, also on submission for the officers that are submitting to our office who would not have an account present, those individuals, we have keypads that you can actually put signatures on, and then those are captured digitally, so they will be on the receipts.
Excellent. I'm assuming that was a learning process that you needed to switch to the keypads at some point.
Absolutely. It's always a learning process.
Great. Thank you. Timothy, the next question is for you, please. When developing your own worksheets and data storage systems, is there anything to avoid? Any tips you've learned from trials and tribunes?
Certainly. Throughout the years, we started with worksheets that were housed completely within our LIM system. Over time, those worksheets get dated as technology changes. And we decided that we wanted to move to more flexibility in our worksheets and being able to adapt them more rapidly by bringing them all in-house. So we said, hey, each discipline, please go out and design your own worksheets, and didn't give a whole lot of guidance, other than, go make what works for you. And we have a lot of people that are very technology savvy, and then they got there and they learned how to start programming in Visual Basic, which is way, beyond what we anticipated. And then over time, people move into different positions, or they may leave the laboratory system. So your knowledge base that you had to develop and implement these worksheets may leave. So my little bit of guidance there is, as you begin this process, don't overcomplicate your worksheets and what you're going to have. Sometimes the KISS principle is a little bit better, so keep it simple and try not to get too much programming involved in it.
Thank you, Tim. Let's see, our next question, Mandy. What were the main challenges that you encountered when integrating the morgue and lab systems?
Well, one of the main things that is still an ongoing challenge, they are not completely integrated just yet, but the platforms are very different visually. So when you're dealing with an operation where you have multiple people having to use the system, it's not intuitive if you're not in it all the time and don't have that experience with it. So the fact that they do not mirror one another is definitely a challenge for individuals to utilize them and to get the information they need. So it really is more of a training situation where they need to spend more time going over where the information can be found. And then also making sure people understand that since it is a different system that they may not utilize, if there's information that they need, the best option is to go to the individuals who had actually worked on that case. That way we can make sure the information being sought out is accurate when they do find it. So it is definitely different. However, we do have a lot of similarities that allow that integration to start to happen, some of which is evidence handling. So since evidence is handled and maintained similar in both systems, that gives a little bit more of, a uniformity in both systems that's easier for the user.
Thank you, Mandy. Tim, this next question really resonates with anyone who's dealt with their IT department. What did your IT department express concerns regarding your standalone network and its potential vulnerabilities?
So with our instrument network that we had to turn into the standalone network, yeah, there definitely was some concerns there in the beginning. And that's why we couldn't integrate it directly with our LIM system, is because the standalone instrument network is not on the Department of Justice overall internal network. So it's completely separate and the two can't communicate with each other. So by having all of our instruments that may not have these security features at the time and the most up-to-date security patches for the operating systems, that limited the vulnerability to the rest of the Department of Justice network by keeping those on their own standalone network. And looking, from the web portal access as well to gain entry, into the LIMS online portal, that is username and password protected. So only authorized users can come in through the web portal. When we look at our policies and procedures that are also out there hosted in the cloud through SharePoint, we also require for users who are accessing that to have a Microsoft account with username and password to access that. Fortunately, Microsoft allows everyone to create a free Microsoft account. So if they don't have one, they can set that up during the process to gain access to our policies and procedures.
And Tim, what software is used to pull the instrumental data into your LIMS?
That I can't actually tell you because I'm not sure. So I just know that is something that was worked in conjunction with the LIMS vendor and our IT department to set up as some type of file watcher service that is based off the naming convention of the files. It looks for that file, it recognizes that it belongs into the LIMS database, and it will reach out and grab that file and put it into the appropriate case file in the LIMS system.
Thank you. For this next question, if you could both feel free to answer. Has the transition to digital allowed or assisted your lab to offer remote work options?
I can go first, Timothy, if that's okay.
That'll work.
Perfect. We do not have remote work options as a standard in our office. However, during the height of COVID, when we were working remotely, having a lot of our information right there available allowed the individuals to accomplish quite a bit while they were working remotely. So it has definitely assisted. And the fact that we had some of that in place already was a blessing in disguise. We didn't realize how much it was going to be.
I will say that the digital platform does allow for some remote work, but still with being a laboratory, there's only so much that you can do off-site. You've got to be on-site in order to do the wet chemistry work and to run the instrumentation. There is the ability to do some off-site data review if you have the appropriate software that's on maybe a laptop in order to be able to go through and maybe examine GC mass spec data, for example. With our LIMS system, once everything is in the LIMS, it does lead to the ability to perform technical administrative reviews remotely. But there's, just going to be some things that you can't get away from being in the lab space to do. So, but, being electronic does give you a little bit more flexibility than if you have paper files only.
Excellent. And this next question, either or both of you could answer this as well. And this listener beat me to the punch. I was thinking the same thing. How do you respond to a defense motion to show all of your work product and notes?
Mandy, do you want to go first?
Sure, I can do that. When we do get those motions and requests from either the prosecution or defense, we can still print all of that information out at any time. So it's held electronically, captured, but it can then be printed out. So for example, our chain of custody record, that can be printed out and show every transaction that happened with all of the dates, times, and itemized either initials, signatures, names of individuals where the evidence had gone. So while we maintain it electronically, paper is always a possibility.
For us, when we release our case file through our LIMS system, the district attorney's office is automatically provided the lab report, the bench notes, the printouts from the instruments and everything with each case. In North Carolina, discovery goes through the prosecution to the defense, and they are required to hand over their case file to the defense upon request. So we provide everything to the district attorney's office and let them then provide that information to the defense upon the request. How they choose to handle that is up to each district attorney's office. Sometimes they print our file to paper. Other times they, will provide it in an electronic format.
And another joint question, and if Mandy, you can start with this first part, is how are you handling information obtained from crime scenes? Are the crime scene investigators using tablets, or are they still using paper formats?
Our crime scene is still actually using all paper. We have started to look at the transition to tablets a few years ago. It wasn't something that there's a lot of resistance. So it's a challenge. It definitely is, but there are some great options moving forward. So it's something we are going to look at potentially revisiting, but we need to have something that's going to work best for them. So right now, that's all paper.
For us, it's very limited if we are to go out and actually process a crime scene. Most of what we do now, everything's submitted to us. In the rare event that we would respond to a crime scene to provide assistance, we would take anything there and just write it down as paper notes. And then when we return to the laboratory, we would scan in the paper notes as a PDF and include it in our LIMS system.
Great. And on that same topic, how are you handling case files for latent print comparisons? Mandy, we can start with you.
Okay, great. We do still have a paper file, so the paper file will still exist. However, any of the work that the individual examiners are doing, whether it's on any of our computer systems, they still have that available. So they are looking at things a lot of times on the computer system, but right now we do still have the ability to print out those hard copies if the examiner would prefer that. So we haven't gone completely away from an entire case file.
In our latent section, all the notes and everything are in electronic format. The comparisons themselves can either be conducted electronically on screen or they can be conducted on paper. We actually create a sub-item of evidence that actually gets returned for everything that's compared. So if there's a latent print that we've pulled a card from one of the databases, we'll create a sub-item of evidence, and that actually goes back with the case itself. As an item of evidence. But when enhancements occur, we maintain the enhancements all in an electronic database as well. And then when we go for the comparison, again, that would then create a sub-item of evidence that's returned.
Thank you. And Mandy, if you could start us answering this next question. What did your training and outreach program look like for teaching submitters on how to use the web portals? And then Timothy, if you could follow up with your answer as well.
At the beginning, when it was fresh and brand new, we did have options to be able to have individuals come to our office and go through a formal training with our evidence control coordinator at that time. We also, though, have an actual manual on our website. So it allows the user to go step by step through what's going to be required for submission and the different fields that they'll have to enter information into. In addition to those, though, our information technology manager, she will reach out to agencies if they do have questions or need assistance. And when they have new users that need to go into the program, she sets them up so she can then also go through all that information with them as well if they have questions.
When we transitioned to the online web portal, we actually held quite a few webinars on how to go through and use the web portals and do online submissions. So as we were implementing them in, we had huge sessions of multiple different people attending where we'd go through and show them how to use the web portal to, whether it's a district attorney's office to gain access to the completed case records or to search for the case records, to find out the status of the case and where it is. For the submitting agencies, training on how to go through and complete the electronic request for examination in order to get all that information to the laboratory for a pre-log standpoint, and then also how to pull their case records once it was complete. So there was lots of webinars that were conducted on that, multiple different sessions. In addition to that, we recorded the same information and then have actually uploaded that within the web portal as hyperlinks and by category. So if somebody is up there and they forget how to do something, they can click that hyperlink and go back and play the recording to refresh their memory on how to do it.
That's a great idea with the recording of them, Timothy. And our next question, for The collation of data in a particular case, so for example, screening results and confirmation results. Mandy, we'll start with you. Do you combine all data into a single PDF file, or are all separate results added to an electronic folder and then uploaded individually to that case in LIMS?
So all of our documentation for any of the testing that we're doing for our screening results, confirmation results, presumptive tests, those are all entered to data entry style into our IMS. And then when we provide our actual notes document, that is all pulled from the data entry fields. So then it actually allows us to customize how we want our notes page to look, where we'd like the placement of all of our information and what to include on that. And then the actual instrumental data analysis, though, that is something that is not part of all of those notes. It is separate. So that would have to then be scanned into the system or attached in the file with the notes document as well. Those same data entry fields we're utilizing to build our report in many sections as well. So the report is actually generated in multiple sections by just hitting a button. And it's all of the data that has already been entered, then populates the report for them.
We have a similar type process in which the summary of the results, the interpretations, all recorded in the notes. The instrumental printouts themselves are typically individual files that are imported into the LIMS system and saved, with a couple of exceptions like toxicology that does a lot of batch processing. Some of the quality control metrics and stuff that they have, that's saved in a batch file, that's saved in LIMS in a different place that may not be associated with that direct case. So it's kind of, it depends on the discipline and the needs of the discipline, how that information is stored. But, once we release the case and it's sent to the customer, all of the files that are included in the case file are merged into one PDF document. And then there's a table of contents that tells you where everything is in the finalized case file.
Thank you. And Mandy, how do you handle backups of electronic lab results where work cannot be repeated? Is data backed up throughout the day? Is there a certain time of day that it's backed up? And what is your continuity plan if for some reason LIMS or the internet goes down?
Sure. So the data is backed up throughout the day. There is a save option on every field, on every panel that the analyst would be using. So they would need to save their data in that format. But if the entire system would go down, we do have backups that run every day, and those backups are going to be maintained in multiple locations. So for example, where the data warehouse is stored, if something would happen in that location, it's backed up multiple times. Now, also, though, for anything that we would need to do manually, say, for example, we have a network outage or a complete power failure, all of our systems can still be done on paper. So we do have the ability to go back to our former processes. All of those are still in place. We can do manual submissions. We can do, for the morgue, any of our case investigations that need to be done, we can do all of that on paper. And then when the system comes back up, we can then go backwards and add that back into the system. So we do then have it electronically. So we definitely keep those all in our back pocket and make sure everyone still knows the manual process just in case.
And Timothy, is yours a similar situation?
Yes, it is. Our LIMS server resides on the state of North Carolina's data center, which is backed up through state IT rules. And we also have paper forms as backups in case things go down. So that way business can continue should the network not be available.
Great. Well, I wanted to thank you both again. Unfortunately, we do not have time for all of the questions, but please feel free to reach out to Mandy and Timothy for additional information. Their contact information will reappear in the final slides. And thank you all for attending. And Mandy and Timothy, thank you once again.
Before you leave today's webinar, I'd like to draw your attention to our feedback form. It takes less than 5 minutes to complete and can be accessed via the checkbox icon directly above the chat. Your honest feedback is invaluable as we continually search for ways to improve and provide the best experience possible. Lastly, across the top of the live stream window are links to our social media profiles, including Twitter, LinkedIn, and Facebook. There is also a link to the FTCOE website, the Just Science podcast, and the FTCOE newsletter registration. Like, follow, or subscribe to stay up to date with everything the FTCOE is doing in support of the forensic community. Thank you again for attending, and we hope everyone has a great day.